an insight into the psychology of the Palestine-Israel conflict. Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam. The conflict between Israel and Hamas now spread into Israel and Hezbollah, poised now to become a confrontation between Israel and Iran, with the Houthis playing in the background, sometimes in the foreground. The whole of this region seemingly about to be plunged into an unprofitable, dangerous war, not just for the people of this region, but also for humankind at large. What little sense of history I have makes me believe that what is lost sight of in understanding the situation and handling the situation and trying to evolve a solution to the problem, all that discounts a particular aspect of this problem which I believe needs to be now taken particular note of. And the very limited purpose of this video is to highlight very briefly that particular psychological aspect. As all of us know, the attitude, the perception of each other involving the Jews and the Palestinians is one of irreconcilable conflict, opposition, enmity, incompatibility. Both are totally convinced that one can exist only at the expense of the other. In other words, peaceful coexistence is an utter impossibility as far as these two people groups located in this region are concerned. And that is true of the confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah, because basically the region involves people in the same background and bracket. Now, what is that background and what is the psychology bred by this background? I think the most important thing to remember about the Jews and the Palestinians is that both are exiles. I repeat, both are exiles. As I have pointed out in a couple of earlier videos, the history of the Jews is distinguished for the complete unsettlement of Jews from their homeland, and they're living as exiles or as a diasporic people for a long, long period of time. 2 millennia, that's not a short span of time. And the psychological impact of this kind of having to live in exile for such a long period of time, or generations put together, is something very deep and complicated. Unfortunately, this is not being paid any attention to, and it has to be factored into the peculiar mind in which the peculiar mindset in which the Jews think of their predicament and devise their strategies for survival. The peculiar thing about the historical condition of this region is that not only the Jews are exiles, but also the Palestinians are exiles. And the most remarkable thing about the situation is that Palestinians have been rendered exiles by exiles. I can't think of a comparable situation anywhere else in the world. The Jews were historical exiles. They lost their homeland way back in AD 70, when the might of Rome came upon this tiny stretch of land, and the Jewish land was literally devastated. The Jerusalem temple was attacked, and people who sought refuge in the temple were butchered. And historians who record this event with a great degree of exaggeration say that the massacre was to such an extent that the blood of the victims rose up to the level of the bridle of the horses. The massacre was conducted by soldiers on horseback. So they were scattered over the face of the earth. Now, anyone can understand, and all of us should be able to understand, that having to live in this state without a home, without a place that they can call their own, creates a particularly sensitive, even pathological psychology. And the most distinctive aspect of the psychology is that it makes you see everyone as your enemy, not merely enemy in the ordinary sense of the term, but as an existential threat to you. Therefore, survival becomes an extremely important issue for the Jews. It is not just ordinary security as we people understand it. For them, security is the same as survival. Mere security will not satisfy the Jewish mind because of the historical devastation that the Jewish people have suffered in their psyche. Their psychology is forged in this furnace of the exilic condition, the condition of being exiles. It is something that we have to make a special attempt to understand. But when the Jews were allowed to return to their putative or supposed promised land or their homeland by a political act under the leadership of Great Britain in 1948, what happened? By then, this entire land was occupied by the Palestinians, and they had to be displaced in order to carve out a homeland for the Jews coming home after a diasporic existence of 2 millennia. Now that is why the Palestinians still talk with great anguish about Nakfa, the process by which they were expelled from their homeland. Who expelled them? People who never had a homeland for 2000 years. But the fact that this place was their homeland before AD 70 is something that most Palestinians find very difficult to understand and accept. For them, all that matters is that in 1948, because of the intervention of the imperial forces, particularly Great Britain, they were driven out of their homeland. So, which is their homeland? The homeland of the Jews. Who were the Jews who lost their homeland, the same homeland, 2000 years ago? That's why I'm saying that the most unique aspect of the Palestinian psychology is that they are made exiles by exiles, which makes it all the more difficult for them to accept. It makes them feel inordinately indignant that they have been made exiles by the erstwhile exiles. This is the reason why organizations like movements like the Hamas and Hezbollah are very adamant that they will not allow the Jews to exist where they have been relocated by an act of will or a political act by forces alien to them, utterly alien to them. They feel, and they're very legitimate in their own eyes in feeling so, that great injustice has been done to them and that they have every right to get their grievances redressed. And given the circumstances, the only way they can have justice done to them is via force. And the only agencies that are credible enough and capable enough to do justice by violence to them are the Hamas and the Hezbollah. Therefore, both these organizations or these movements command a lot of respect, almost delirious respect, and total faith on the part of the people in this region. And this is something that cannot be wished away. It has to be factored into the equation. So, Both sides, unfortunately, are bedeviled by the same pathological psychology, the psychology of being exiles. One, of course, erstwhile exiles who have been allowed to come back home and create a homeland for themselves at the expense of the Palestinians who were driven out of their homes and rendered homeless. That's why I did a video on homelessness in connection with the Beirut predicament yesterday. So both sides can only see each other as utterly incompatible with one's own existence. And the people who talk so smugly about the two-nation theory, on the assumption that given certain conditions, these two people groups can happily coexist, forget their part, come out of their wounded psychology, which has remained there for 2000 years. The case of the Palestinians, much less, from 1948 to be precise, that all this can be sort of deleted, washed away. And because some other forces want them to live peaceably together, forgetting all this background, abjuring all the memories, etc. I sincerely don't believe that this is possible. I stated this in a video devoted to this theme exactly a year ago, that though many people who seem to be far wiser than I am, talk very persuasively, sounding that they themselves are very convinced of the viability of the two-nation theory, that Israel and Palestine should become two independent sovereign states, full-fledged democratic nations. I find it absolutely impossible to believe that this is possible, because I factor the psychology both of the Jews and of the Palestinians into this equation. And if my understanding of collective psychology is worth even a penny, I have to say this again, that the idea that these two people groups can be made to live side by side with each other in amity, in brotherhood, in peace, is simply impossible. It cannot work. Try as hard as I might, I simply am unable to persuade myself that this is possible. Now, therefore, the utter hopelessness of the situation here. I'm sorry I have to say this, because hope is the last thing we should give up. But when I regard the actual situation on the ground, aggravated by this kind of pathological psychology that's been playing a major role, I have to say that I find it very difficult to hold on to my vanishing, evaporating hope. So, what will happen? I'm afraid, as I said a couple of days ago, the situation will go only from bad to worse. I don't see the situation improving anytime soon. We're going to witness a great deal of bloodshed, a great deal of destruction and devastation. And I feel very strongly, as I felt a year ago, that Israel is going to face very, very hard times, unimaginably hard times. I think they have bitten far too much, far beyond their capacity to chew. For all their shrewdness, for all their ability to understand geopolitical situation, for all their genius, Israel has landed itself in a soup. But then there are many people who argue with me, and they are on very strong grounds, that Israel had no option but to do this. Well, that's precisely because we think through the mind of Israel, and that mind is a wounded mind, insecure mind, the mind that is riddled with the psychology of having been exiles, a mind, therefore, that sees only enemies everywhere. It's something that Israel cannot help. Just as the Palestinians who have been expelled from their native land in order to create space for the Jews, and who are therefore now living in exile in Gaza and adjoining areas, they are now suffering from the same predicament of exiles. So it is two exilic pathological psychologies coming into a head-on collision, generating this unending heat, which generates a world of destruction and escalating, intensifying human suffering. I can only hope and pray that there will be an end to this. Ultimately, I would like to believe that nothing is impossible for the Almighty God. I believe divine wisdom has to prevail. Human ability cannot save the situation. I'm pretty convinced about it. So I have to pray for divine intervention in this situation of massive and escalating human suffering. And I don't know how this is going to end. I only wish that it end soon, sooner than later. May peace prevail. May the human mind be healed of its memories that wrangle in the soul, memories that are very difficult to handle. And to make light of all this, and to think that some kind of diplomacy can work and deliver the goods is something that I find hard to believe. I'd be very happy if it happens. And I sincerely pray that it may happen sooner than later. Thank you.